Nobody wants to write code that contains bugs, but it's a fact of the programmer's life. Visual Studio contains many excellent debugging tools that I will show you in this chapter. In this demonstration, I'm going to use this project called Using Breakpoints. My first step is to show you the different settings you can configure for debugging. Let's go to Tools, Options, and then click on the debugging section. Another way of getting here is to go to Debug and then choose Options and Settings. In this first section, you can see many different options. Ask before deleting breakpoints, break all processes when one process breaks, and many other ones. Enable just my code, enable the exception assistance. I'm going to leave all these at the defaults for the moment. In Edit and Continue, I want to make sure that I enable Edit and Continue. What this means is that when I stop at a breakpoint, I can make changes to my code and then resume running the code without having to restart the application. Just-in-time debugging is a technique for debugging a program that is started outside Visual Studio. If you have enabled just-in-time debugging, a crash will display a dialog box that asks if you want to debug, which causes Visual Studio to open and load the source code for that application. Naturally, this only makes sense for developer machines. In the output window, you can determine whether debug output is written to the output window. So you can turn off the different settings. All debug output, off or on. You can choose whether to output exception messages, all sorts of information, thread exit messages. You can also debug problems with your WPF animation and data binding and things like that. Finally, if you want to, you can download symbol files or PDB files from Microsoft Symbol servers by clicking on this checkbox and then specifying where to cache the information. I'm not going to do that for this example. I'll unselect the Microsoft Symbol servers and then click OK. So how do you put a breakpoint in your code? Let's show you. I'll go over to this main window.xaml. I'll double click on this button to look at the code behind. And I'll put a breakpoint on this line here, string result. To do that, I can go over to this gray bar on the side of the window and click once. That tells me there's a breakpoint at line 37. To turn off the breakpoint, I click a second time on the red dot. I favor the keystroke way of doing this, which is by pressing the F9 key on the keyboard. Now let's run the application and see what happens. I will make sure I'm running under a debugger by pressing F5. That's important. When I click on the button, it hits my breakpoint. You can tell you're at your breakpoint by looking over here, and you'll see that there's a red dot, and superimposed over the red dot is a yellow arrow. Also, my line of code is yellow. I'll click on the Continue button, and this time I'll click on this second button. Currently, the second button is displaying the word Martin. I want to put a breakpoint in here using another technique. Control-K, Control-U to uncomment those lines of code. I can use a class called the debugger class, which is part of the classes that Microsoft provides, to check out the debugger situation. What I'm doing here is verifying whether or not a debugger is currently attached to the running process. If there is a debugger attached, then I say system.diagnostics.debugger.break. This causes it to break and stop at this line of code. I'll press F5 to run the application. Click on that button a second time, and you see that it hit my breakpoint even though there's no red dot over here on the margin bar. Let me stop this and run this application from the hard drive. I'll choose to open folder in File Explorer. I'm going to double click on this exe file. And when I click on this button, it shows the text. It's not breaking because I don't have a debugger attached. So let me close this, return back to Visual Studio, comment out this if statement, or delete it, like so, and try running this again. I'll compile the application, switch over to File Explorer, double click on this again. This is the just-in-time debugger. It hit my breakpoint. It says, would you like to debug this? This would also happen if something crashed on the application. Now, if I click on debug, it will ask me what I want to load. I want to load this into a new instance of Visual Studio, and then I'll click yes. It launches Visual Studio and loads my code and hits my debugger break. Now you know a few ways to add a breakpoint to your code. Check out the stepping through your code video to see how to step through your code and rewind your code and repeat actions.